Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be at this particular point in time. It's great to have you here. Well, today we're going to be considering the aspect of blocks. I don't know if when you were young, you played with blocks, you made houses, you made all sorts of things on the floor and enjoyed yourself. But is that what we're talking about? Or could it possibly be something else? Well, let's invite our guest on who's going to help us to look at the aspect of blocks. Good afternoon, Gary.
Hey, Shane, how you doing?
Good, my friend. You had a good day so far?
Yeah, it's been great. Actually, really productive and relaxing at the same time. So
How's that work?
I don't know. Well, I guess on the weekends I tend to take it a little bit like if I know there's more than enough time to take care of stuff, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's finish watching this movie, and then we'll do this and that. And so the big debate today was, are we going to be able to go to this place like an hour from here and get a nice meal, or we're going to go to a really place called Gates of the Mountains? It's like that's the big question of the day, and the yard work will come later. It's just I don't know. I like weekends like that you just sort of do whatever you want to do and you get things done. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Nice that it's chilled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we get going, I want to thank you again because this is the first time we've spoken face to face for that really great event last week, Uncaged. I wrote a little talk, 5 hours of music. That was really, really fun.
It was definitely fun. Definitely. But I've got to say that the girls who were in behind the scenes and who hosted it, they all just made it go along so smoothly, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. I know you were in there and I know you enjoyed it. So it was a fun 5+ hours, and it was amazing. So we look forward to doing another one. But we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah, sure.
I guess that had to do with building blocks too, one block at a time, and the concert turned up.
Right.
But what are we talking about blocks for? When we talk about blocks, in what aspect of life can blocks be a hindrance and be useful?
It's interesting that you said useful, because I wasn't really focusing that way, but then I thought of examples in my life where a block, something that was really blocking me, was really super in the way of getting anything done, became a building block. So I would say that a block, in the sense of let's say negative block, for lack of a better word, something that's preventing you from accomplishing something or from being something, accomplishing a goal, whatever that goal might be. It might be just to be happy today, or to get a new job, or to move into a new, whatever your goal is. A block is anything that's getting in the way, or it could be something that's helping us build toward, which is kind of the way you're referring to it when you say a building block. It could be used as something that's going to help us build toward a goal.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so seeing as I sidetracked a little bit, let's get back onto track.
Okay.
So take it away, Gary. Let's have a look at the aspect of blocks.
Okay. So first to talk about, I hate to use the word negative. It's just not a good word, but I mean, it has its place, but blocks that are in the sense that it's getting in the way. The first thing, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a block that, like I said, is preventing me from being in the career I want to, or making advancements in my career, being successful. Or it could be a block of we're just an emotional wreck because of all the aftermath of leaving the group, the JWs, and all the emotional nonsense that comes with that. Whatever it is, it's kind of the same thing. And I don't mean to ever minimize any one thing, because one person's block might be, but I got a flat tire and I need to go to the grocery store, and then somebody else that's just leaving the JWs and is being ostracized and everything. It's like they got much bigger fish to fry, So I'm not trying to minimize anybody's, but in a sense, theoretically, it all boils down to the same thing. What it is that you can only tackle so many things at one time. So what makes a block is what it's turned into, So in other words, what we've made of it, or like a brick wall is what I compare it to. a brick wall is made of many bricks. If you had one brick standing in front of you, you'd be like, oh, hopefully you notice that it's there because you don't want to stub your toe on it. But is it blocking you from anything? No, of course not. 2 or 3 bricks don't block you from anything. It's just 2 or 3 bricks. What's the big deal? But you put them all together and you cement them together, and the next thing you know, you've got a brick wall. And that's that. So it's very much like that when we talk about blocks that are getting in the way of us accomplishing something.
Mm-hmm.
If you really think back on it, and anybody listening might disagree with me, but and when I think about it back on it in my life, and if anybody really thinks back on it, you'd probably really, if you think, anytime that you were really felt like, oh my God, I have no idea what to do. How am I ever going to get this and that accomplished? If you really think about it, it wasn't just that one thing. It was a whole bunch of things that were preventing you from doing the one thing. Because if you could focus on that one thing and there was nothing preventing you from accomplishing it, you'd accomplish it, So my technique for overcoming blocks is to take a look at the individual bricks and evaluate them individually in two ways. 2 criteria I use. One is it something I can actually affect or change or work with today? If it's not, then what are you worried about it for? If you forget about it, you're not going to actually forget, because a month from now it'll still be there, and maybe that'll be the time to work with it. But in the meantime, if you can't work on it today, why are you thinking about it today? It's preventing you from doing all the other things you can do. So just worry about the things you can actually do something about, and then of those things, how many can you do at a time? Probably one. Sometimes things are so closely related that you're accomplishing several things by doing one thing, but for the most part, it's really just one thing at a time. So don't worry about items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Just worry about the number one thing that, and you might want to prioritize them in terms of, if I do number 1 first, then I can do number 2. I can't do number 2 until I do number 1. So that's the thing with blocks, is to, first of all, our perception. I mean, there are real blocks. I'm not for a minute going to say that we're imagining it when something is really blocking us from accomplishing something. We do tend to exaggerate and things like that, but I'm not for a minute saying that that's the problem. Every time you feel blocked from something, it probably is something that's very, very real. But what happens in our perception is when we combine all these things, and we don't even realize we're doing it, we combine all these bricks and we build a wall. Yep. And now we can't get past the wall, and there's cement holding the bricks together. So you have to have a sledgehammer to knock the thing apart. So that's the first thing, is just, changing our perception to realize that it's really just a bunch of bricks. And if we just take them one at a time and use those 2 criteria, what can I actually work with today and change and have power over? And what's the most important thing to do first?
Yeah. So when you talk about the first one, prioritizing, what do you mean by prioritize?
Just in terms of which one should I work on first. And it might be the most difficult because you want to get that out of the way, and the other ones will fall into place. Or it might be the one that you have time for today. Or, I can't say. Everybody's an individual with their own circumstances. Or again, it might just be because the other ones depend on item number 1. I should probably try to use an example. Let's say, like I mentioned, you had a flat tire and you need to go to the grocery store, and you're having company over for dinner, and you forgot to call one of them to give them directions and this and that. Well, if you go out and you find out you had a flat tire, about the only thing you really need to worry about is getting to the grocery store. So you either got to fix the flat or get some other way of getting to the grocery store. So that's the item. No, nothing else matters. So worrying about, oh my God, I got a flat tire and all these people are coming over and I haven't even called Betty yet. And plus, I forgot to turn the oven on. And it's just worry about the thing that's the most important. That because none of the other things are going to happen if you don't fix the flat tire.
So Karen.
Oh, well, so it just sort of simplifies it. I mean, I never mean to minimize it, but when you really come down to it, a lot of times it's really a lot simpler when we just sort of do that.
And what if we're struggling to make it a priority?
Yeah. Well, you can take out a piece of paper and write it down. That's not a bad idea.
Okay.
You can, just take out a piece of paper and just maybe make two columns. And the one column is what are the things that that I have power over, that I can really do today? I can actually change something about this. If it's not one of those things, put it in column B, because you know what? You'll like if part of column B is the mortgage has to be paid and I have got no money in the bank, nothing. So how am I going to pay the mortgage? Well, you can't worry about it today because you don't have money in the bank. Have money in the bank, so don't worry about it. Believe it or not, you will remember. You're not going to forget that you have to pay the mortgage. It's going to be on your mind every day.
Yeah.
You're taking it off of the top of that crazy list, So you make your two lists, and then of column A, the things that I can do today, just start putting numbers next to them. Just go down the list. Maybe there's 5 or 10 things, and just go down the list and say, what's the most important one I should work on that the other ones are going to depend upon me completing first. And then just put a 1 next to it, or whatever you want to do, put it on another list or something like that. Beyond that, I would say that, again, because it's a matter of perception, and it's also a matter of uncluttering our mind, because we all get this way where we just can't make sense out of things. It's overwhelming. There's so much stuff we have to do, or there's so many emotional barriers that we have to get past to get to the next one, and this and that. And what helps, I believe, more than anything in the world, by far the most effective thing in the world, is just to talk to somebody. Because when you talk to somebody, there's a mental process that goes on and you're not even aware of, where you're starting to sort it out. And you actually don't even necessarily need a response from the person. I mean, it's helpful if they can say something constructive, but just the fact that you're talking to somebody that you trust, that's not going to be judgmental, not going to be critical, is not going to offer a lot of suggestions and rules and do's and don'ts, is just going to listen and say, oh, really? Oh, wow. Oh, well, so it sounds like, and they might say, well, it sounds like the most important thing to you right now is getting the flat tire fixed. Did I hear that right, or what? Well, yeah, you are right. So you just by talking about it, you're getting the priority straightened out in your own mind. The key thing is the person you talk to should not be somebody that's going to be judgmental, not be somebody that's going to be critical, that's going to offer a quick solution. Like, well, obviously you have to do this first. What's the matter with you? Don't you get it? If somebody does that, that's not the person to talk to. So it's not judgmental, not biased, not order, giving you dictates and things like that. And really what happens when you do that is that you clear your own mind just by talking about it and bouncing it off somebody that's not judgmental and that's actually listening. Your mind gets so clear. And as a matter of fact, I do this sometimes, and I forgot to get it ready, but there's something that I read to people sometimes to see if I could find it. But it basically is something that we're all familiar with, especially as XJWs. Here it is. So I'm not quoting a scripture. Don't get all triggered and everything like that. But it's going to sound like a scripture, okay? And I'm not giving advice. It's just I'm just going to tell you what this says. And you, again, I think everybody will be familiar with these words. Do not be anxious over anything, but in everything, along with thanksgiving, let the peace that surpasses all understanding guard your hearts and your mental powers. So if you're familiar with that, you probably realize that I took God and Jesus and Holy Spirit right out of it. And I'm not trying to alter the Bible or anything, I'm not being disrespectful, but it's because really what we're doing, like in that prayer process, is we're just expressing ourselves to somebody that we think is going to listen and not judge us. Mm-hmm. And that just clears our head. And so when it says that the peace that surpasses all understanding guards your heart and your mental powers, that means we have mental power. It's not saying it's going to give you mental power. It says it's going to guard your mental powers. So we have the power to overcome these blocks and to come up with solutions and work them through. We just get confused and overwhelmed sometimes. So we need to talk to somebody, whether it's God that you're going to pray to, or you want to talk to your best friend or a life coach or a therapist or whatever it is. It's just that process of of talking about it, it just creates other neural pathways other than just sitting around stewing about what our problems are. That goes nowhere. And before you know it, our minds are clear, and we have a clear. And then you follow up a week later and you say, hey, thanks a lot for talking with me, Shane. I really really appreciate our conversation. And you know what I did this week is I got the new car I was telling you that I really needed to get the job, and I'm so glad. And you're going to be like, okay, well, I'm glad you did that, but I didn't really tell you to get a car. I hope you realize that because that's what happens with the right person. You realize what you need to do. They don't tell you what to do. So
if we're in that situation, then if somebody wants to talk to us, are you saying little things like just listening and maybe asking a simple question are things that we can actually do for others?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If we want to be that person, I mean, it's a skill, it's an art that not everybody has, but you can develop it. I mean, sometimes we might call our best friend and think that, this is the person that I count on for everything, but we might actually find that we're being given orders and being, just like, well, why don't you just do this? What's the matter with you? Why don't you just do this? Just do that.
Yep.
And that's not, it's not usually, once in a while we need that, I suppose. I'm not saying it's a never thing, but typically that's not somebody that's really listening. It's somebody that's already made up their mind on what you need they're trying to fix something, and you don't need somebody to fix something. Your blocks are your own blocks. You need somebody just to bounce stuff off of, and come up with and you can come up with you don't realize that's what you're doing. You're probably going to imagine that your friend gave you the greatest advice in the world, but if they're really the right kind of listener, they're not giving you advice at all. You're kind of coming to your own conclusions.
Yeah, no, that's handy. So you say we can actually develop that?
Skill? Just just determining to not be judgmental, and to just guard against the tendency, because we all have it. I do too, and believe me, I very very seldom give anybody actual advice, but once in a while there's a temptation to do it, and then I have to take kind of drop back a little bit and say, no, that's not what they really didn't call me for advice. Even if they said I just like some advice, so we all have a tendency to do it, and doesn't make you a bad person. It's just that we do it. But just kind of guard against being quick to judge or to say, well, why did you do that? Well, of course you got problems, you knucklehead. Why did you do this?
Yeah.
Just listen and then ask the right question, which could be something as simple as, well, you just mentioned 3 really, really important things. I could totally see why it bothers you, the fact that your mortgage is late and you don't know if you're going to have a job tomorrow, and then so third and fourth thing. I totally get it. But of those things, which is the one that bothers you the most? Which is the one that's the most important to you? And then they're going to say, well, geez, all of them. But I guess really, I guess it's the fact that I just lost my job, or I'm going to lose, or whatever it is, So that's, when we ask people a question like, what's the most important thing to you, or one of my favorite ones, and I'll tell you this, a big secret is I learned this from an elder years ago. Elders, for the most part, are really, really bad about listening and really, really bad about not giving advice. They just love to give advice. They love to hear themselves talk. And they love to know that they're the ones that control the congregation, and they got the brain, and nobody else does. And I never really thought that was a good idea. And this one guy who's now a circuit overseer, but he's one of the best guys I've ever met, honestly. I don't know how he's doing as a CEO, but he just we were on a call with a couple in the congregation that I was really good friends with. We used to play cards together all the time. Our families were always together, going on trips together. And I had no idea that they were having marital problems. I mean, you see little things, but I had no idea that it was serious, that the husband was actually thinking, I don't want to come home from work anymore. I drive home and I don't even know why I'm going home. And so the two of us are sitting there thinking, oh, wow, we had no idea, So this this guy, he says, he just said one magical sentence. He says, what do you want to have happen? What do you want to have happen? And when somebody answers that question, typically it's not, I want a divorce, or I want to see my wife die, or whatever, it's like, well, I'd like to see. So then the next thing is like, okay, so how do you see that working out? How do you see that happening? What goals do you think you need to have so you're kind of, by asking a question like that, you're not offering your opinion. You're not giving a suggestion or a command or fixing anything. You're just asking them to express something. What do you want to have happen here? And when they tell you that, then it's like, okay, so how do we get there? What do you think? What do you think that both of you can do to make that happen?
Yeah,
And then when they give you the answer, don't judge that either, because it might be the answer is, well, I think I could maybe spend more time at work, or something like that. And we know that's the answer.
Yep.
But just say, okay, so how would that work? How do you see that working? Like, well, how would that solve the problem? Just don't give answers. Never give answers. Just ask questions. And that's what I do in my life coach business. I'm just a question answerer, a question asker. And then we narrow it down to, okay, so it sounds like your main goal is, X. Did I hear that right? Yeah, I'd say so. Okay, so what tasks do you think that you might want to work on to get to X?
Yeah.
And what things might get in the way of reaching X? And then it's a matter of like, okay, so it sounds to me like you're saying that A, B, and C are the tasks that you want to work on in the next week to get to X.
Yep.
Can you do all three of those in the next week? What do you think? Well, I could probably do A and B. So, okay, so the next time we talk, let's just see how you did with A and B. It's really that simple. Just listen and ask a good question. Don't judge. Again, I'm saying it for the 20th time probably, but don't judge, don't fix, don't command, don't criticize.
So if we're on the other side of the table and somebody says to us, what would you like? And they can't answer that question, what could that person do if they find themselves in that situation all the time?
The person on the other side of the table, you mean?
Yeah.
You might say, well, you mentioned that the problem is X. Like the problem is that you don't really enjoy coming home from work anymore, and when you make the last turn onto your block, you just have this sickening dread that you don't want to even go in the house. So, do you see that as a problem? Well, of course they're going to say, well, yeah. So if that continues, what do you see the future? What future do you see? Just okay. So how would you want that future to change? What would you rather that future be? So it's they might say, well, I guess we'll probably end up getting divorced. And then if you say, how would you like that your future to actually be? And they say, well, I don't want to be divorced. I want to be. So now you have, well, then your goal is to overcome that problem, is what you're saying. And then, so what are the tasks that we can put together?
Okay. So just going a little bit deeper though, if the person on the other table has a habit of saying, I don't know what I want. So we're not sitting on the other side of the table, but we're talking about the person who is sitting there going and listening to that question, and they're going, and they have a habit of doing that. They really struggle with that. Are there any sort of guidelines or encouragement we can put out there to help people think about being able to answer that question when it comes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, acknowledge it. Never invalidate people if they're not thinking clearly or their emotions are out of whack or something, or it seems like that to us. Don't. And
so is that what we should be doing? Like, we're not talking about talking to another person apart from talking to ourselves.
So in other words, we're sitting there thinking about what our goals are, and we can't focus, you mean?
Yeah. I remember one time I went to a business mentor, and he went and said to me, okay, so what do you want for your business? I had no idea. But that one question helped me work out how I could answer some of that later on. So is there a process that we ourselves, if we're struggling to go, well, actually, I want this and this and this, but up to being able to say that, are there things we can do ourselves to be able to work through those things without somebody having to say to us, what do you want?
Right. Well, in other words, do it yourself. Like, don't get to. So again, I think it's a matter of being overwhelmed with all these bricks that are making a wall, and we're seeing it as a wall. So it's a matter of, yeah, I can say I want to be able to take a really great trip next year for a month, but let's see, there's not going to be any money for that. So, but I really like the Mercedes Benz. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we might want, but what's it reasonable to what is to think of it in terms of goals? When I say want, it's think of it in terms of a goal, and what is the most reasonable goal to have for the next month or whatever it is,
Okay. Yeah.
and how long is it going to take me to reach that, and what are the things I have to do to get to that goal? Because we might have multiple goals that are, yeah, every goal has subtasks, but we really typically only work on one goal at a time. So we might have a whole bunch of goals. I don't know. It could be to start your own business. It could be to be a millionaire by next year. It could be to, and we didn't even really start talking about the more, relationship kind of goals and spiritual goals kind of things where it's like, yeah, my mom doesn't talk to me anymore. And, how do I deal with that? And all the consequences of that. We could have a million goals, but what is the one goal that's the most important or is the most achievable right now?
Okay. Yeah.
I have to say, just as a kind of a caveat, or not a caveat, but I don't know, kind of an explanation, is that I'm saying a lot of do's and don'ts, do this and don't do that, and I'm saying don't tell people to do this and do that, but because when you're talking to a whole audience, you can't really talk to the individual and say, tell me about a goal you'd like to reach, because I'm talking to maybe 100 people or something like that. But so I recognize that. But so whenever I say do this or don't do that, don't think that that's like some sort of a contradiction.
Okay.
Maybe it is, but anyway.
So we're just, before we go back onto the subject, to the other side of the table, as it were, so we can actually slowly work on things ourselves so that we don't need to run to somebody every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my life coach business, in fact, I find that to be the case, that not only do people, make a lot of progress toward reaching a particular goal, and it might just be a month's worth of meeting once a week or something like that. But not only do they reach that goal and are super, super happy about it, but they've learned how to reach a goal, and they've learned how to do it themselves. And they've learned, and because I'll tell them every single time somebody comes back to me and says, thank you so much for our conversation yesterday. I went home to my family. This happened to me with a woman at work who was having problems she was from New York City, and she moved out because she was in a really bad neighborhood, and she didn't want her 13-year-old son exposed to that anymore. But then she's having a hard time paying her rent, and her job was, she had health problems. She couldn't do, so I just listened to her, and she actually worked for me, and I took whatever time she needed. I paid her for the time, but whatever time she needed, I just said, just talk to me, and it was probably for about an hour. She just talked about it. And every once in a while, every 5 minutes, I'd say, really? Wow, I can see why that's a problem. I can see why you're concerned about that. And then she'd talk another 5 minutes, and then I'd say, well, it sounds like, and I never really gave her any suggestions. She comes back in the next day and says she talked with her older son, and not the 13-year-old. And she said, she came up with whatever her solution was. And she says, thank you so much for talking to me. I so appreciate your advice. And I said, Janique, I thank, you're welcome. And I appreciate you thanking me. But I don't think I gave you any advice. Did I? What did I say that was? And she'd say, well, we made this decision. I said, yeah, but you thought of that. So you have the power in your own mind to do this. And so the next time she's faced with that kind of a problem, she might need to talk to somebody. Maybe it'll be me, but maybe not. But more likely, she's just will have gotten over that hurdle to where now she knows a little bit more about how to conquer a problem, how to break it down to subtasks, and just take it brick by brick. So Yeah, I think it's it's a big difference between life coaching and therapy, because therapy can go on for months and years, and there's never necessarily any end in sight. Obviously there is, but there's no defined end in sight. Whereas with coaching, it's like, we'll do this for a month and we'll see how it goes, and then the person is going to figure it out. The next thing I'm talking to them like a half year or a year later, and they say, yeah, you know what? I made all that progress with starting my business, and now I'm opening another store. Thanks to God again. And did I help you with that? No, but they figured it out, So so we learn a lot about how to solve problems when we do it that way.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd agree, though, that in a lot of cases, life coaches, while they're brilliant, there is a need for therapy in many cases.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like if somebody is like the root of their problem is actually like an emotional issue, and I don't mean that it's just difficult to get the emotions under control because of this, and that. I mean where it's like a person just has chronic depression. I can help with that usually, but there are times when it's like it's not appropriate. This person really needs to see a therapist. Maybe in some cases even needs medication. I don't really know, but there's a psychiatrist in New York, in the United States. I think he's in California, named David Burns, that I've read a lot of his stuff, and I've attended some of his seminars and things, and his continuing education classes. And he's a licensed, doctorate in psychology, so he can prescribe medication. And he's of the opinion that it's way overprescribed. In most cases, it's totally not necessary. It's just about how you think, and that affects your emotions. And if you could really look, and of course he helps people think through what's bothering them, and that fixes their emotions. So I can do that to some extent, but when it really comes down to it, if that's the problem, I don't wash my hands of it. What I do is I try to recommend them to somebody that could actually benefit them, and especially if I can find somebody that understands what it's like to be an ex whatever, an ex JW or an ex Mormon or ex Scientologist or whatever.
Okay, cool. All right, let's get back on to the other side of the table now. You mentioned in some of the practical things, learn to ask questions and not be judgmental and not criticize and other things. Where can we go from where we left off?
What do you mean? What do you mean where we left off?
So we left off before we ducked over to the other side of the table, as it were. So those ones who have been asked, what would you like, and they can't give us the answer.
Okay. So where would they go?
Well, we've been there helping.
Okay.
Listening, asking questions. Is there a next step?
Well, the next step is, of course, it's up to the person to do the work. And when I say work, it doesn't have to be hard work. Sometimes it is, but because sometimes we're facing some really difficult emotional issues, But whether it's easy or hard or whatever you want to call it, it's work. I mean, if that person doesn't go off and do the subtasks that you kind of agreed they kind of said that's what they need to do, and you said, okay, we're going to write that down. So the next step is accountability. Now, I hate using that word because it conjures up these notions of, all the things that we were accountable for as witnesses to, what we do matters in this respect. And that's not what I'm talking about. I just can't think of a better word for it. But in the training that I got and certification that I got, they use the word accountability. That just means somebody that, like if I was talking to you and you were helping me, you're just a friend, and I talk to you about these goals that I've got, and I can't get it sorted out. And you say, well, okay, so that's your goal. That's really cool. It's going to take a while to get to it, but I think you said that you're going to do these 2 tasks, and you hope to finish them by next week. Then the next thing is for us to have a conversation next week, and for you to say, hey, how you doing? How did you do with your goals, with those tasks?
Yeah.
And if I know that we're going to have that conversation, I have to have something to talk. I have to have something to tell Shane. It tends to make me feel motivated to do it, but also obligated to do it. And again, I don't like to use that word in a negative way, like we do everything out of a sense of obligation, but it kind of creates that sense of this is a task I really need to do. I've got a deadline. Because when I talk to Shane, I don't want to have to say, yeah, I just didn't do that. I just didn't get around to it, because I'm going to sound like an idiot. I'm going to be ashamed of myself, and everything. So that's the second thing, is creating an accountability system where, probably the person you talk to, and again, you don't, it doesn't have to be that you talk to somebody. It could be that you're just making a list yourself. But it's a good idea if you can have a conversation with your mother or your friend or whoever, and just say, hey, this is what I set out to do last week, and I did pretty good. I'm a little bit behind on task B, but what's the difference? If we're working towards our goal, setbacks are going to happen. So we're a little bit late on task B. Okay, no problem. But having that accountability to somebody is, I think, is the next step.
Is there, if they don't get it done, would you put something in the way to penalize them, as it were? Red card, you didn't do it.
You mean as a life coach? Or even as a friend just talking to them?
Even as a friend, yeah.
No, because that's not what a coach does. Like, if you think of a football coach, well, if they're a bad coach, I guess they're going to berate the players and say, why didn't you do that? But if they're a good coach, they know how to encourage and how to cheer somebody on and make them feel good about themselves. Make them know that they have the ability to do this. They have the talent, they have the physique, they have whatever it needs. Whatever they need to do it. So berating them and saying, well, what's the matter with you? I thought we talked about doing A, B, and C, and you didn't do anything. What's the matter with you? But you just have to say, well, I'm sure things came up and everything, but let's kind of revisit that. And now the goal, I just want to be clear, the goal was to do this, right? Yeah, that's right. So that's still your goal, right? And then I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that we identified this and that as tasks that you're going to need to get to there. Is that still something? Yeah. Is it still something you think you can do? Like, is there, like, what's getting in the way, or what got in the way? Was it, because things get in the way, things that we can't predict happen. I mean, you could have had a car crash or something. It's somebody's fault, but it's not necessarily your fault. It's just something that happens. So it doesn't make you a bad person or a lousy goal maker, but it's just like, okay, so let's revise the plan a little bit here. Like, maybe once you get out of the hospital, you could do this or that, whatever. So the point is to just always, if you're a coach, to coach as a coach coaches. In other words, encourage and make them feel good. And if you're doing it yourself, just whatever affirmations you need to tell yourself that you're okay. Just look at that setback as, wow, that was something that I didn't foresee. Maybe I should have foreseen it. Let's see, maybe, I don't know, maybe I couldn't have foreseen it. But even if I could have, does that make me bad? You know what I mean? Just don't get into that whole cycle of blaming yourself and feeling bad about it. But if you're going to be your own coach, just go back to that list you made and say, okay, so we didn't get there, but it's still important, I think, right? So why don't I make a goal of getting this done by next Friday? Or Joe wasn't in last Monday when I needed to call him, so maybe he'll be in next week, or whatever it is. Just don't give up on your goal just because a task didn't work out. Either change the task or redo it or whatever.
Okay, good. Accountability.
Yeah.
Or whatever word goes along with accountability.
Yeah, I wish I could. If anyone comes up with something like, get out the thesaurus. I don't know. I don't like it. Only because it reminds me too much of the JW world. Not that I heard that word used a lot, but that whole concept of like we're compelled. The love of the Christ compels us.
Yeah,
well, it does. Yeah, but that doesn't mean like, oh my God, if I don't do this, I got to feel guilty and ashamed of myself. And that's because that's the way they always made you feel. There's nothing about these blocks that where a guilt and shame should ever enter the picture. If you fail, it just means you fell down and you're going to get up and scrape off your knees and get up and do it again. That's all it means. Doesn't mean you failed at life or at being a good person. It just means that particular task didn't work out when you wanted it to work out.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so let's put it this way. What is the benefit of working through these bricks, talking to either yourself in a positive way or somebody else? What's the benefit with doing all that?
I think it has to do with what it does to our brains. I don't think we realize it. Certainly, we don't realize it consciously. But I'll tell you an example. I used to be a computer programmer back in the day, and I was good at it. I really was. But once in a while, you get just a snag that like this program was not doing what it's supposed to do, and you'd look at your logic, and we'd have it all printed out on paper, and we'd look at it and go over it over and over and again for hours with a fine tooth comb, and you just can't figure out what you did wrong. Like, what is wrong with this program? And then I finally call over, this guy Chet, I used to work with. I finally called Chet and say, Chet, I don't know what the heck's wrong with this program. I mean, look at this logic. If A equals B, then do this, then that, and this. So how is this happening that it's good? And before you know it, before he even gave me an answer, I'd say, well, look at this section of code. If A equals B, then do this. And I'd say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. This was all wrong. And we'd call it the Chet factor or something like that, because it was just I asked him to look. And what it really was there's a different mental process of when we're just examining our problems by ourselves and trying to sort them all out. And if it's not going anywhere, it's not going to go anywhere. You can think about it another 500 times, and there's a good chance it's never going to get resolved. It's a totally different thought process when you start explaining it to somebody else, because you're just it's like I have a really good friend. I had a really good friend that was really good at explaining very complex scientific topics in a very simple way. In order for him to be able to do that, he's got to understand the topic, and he's got to regurgitate it in a way that I'm going to understand it. So it creates different neural pathways, really, because you're putting it into words that the other person can understand, which are the words that you should have been using with yourself, but you can't because you're stuck. So it just uses your brain in a totally different way. It's almost like a miraculous thing, but it works.
Okay, cool.
So now, I'm sorry, you were. Well, I don't know if you wanted to change tracks, because you had mentioned at the beginning something I didn't even think we were going to talk about. Building blocks.
Let's change it.
If you don't mind, I mean, I don't know if it's time to or not, but I don't want to set the agenda for you. But you just made me think about it. And I was talking to someone earlier about, if that comes up, like, what would I talk about? And I remember a time in my life when I had lots of blocks. I had a real brick wall. This is only like 10 years ago. And it was when I first, my leaving the organization was in several steps, and I was not intending to leave. It was just being mistreated one time after another, and things getting worse and worse. And I got to the point where, among other things, I could no longer work in the job that I had decided to work in for like the previous 10 years or so. It involved a lot of testing, a lot of licensing, really, really difficult tests, almost like passing a bar exam. And I really worked hard for it. It cost me a lot of money. And all of a sudden, because of what was done to me, I hate to use the word "to me," but that's what it was. I lost a license, and I couldn't work in that job anymore. My family had left, and and nobody in the congregation was talking to me anymore. So it was long before I was disfellowshipped, and so this is the thing, and I mean, the whole world was collapsing upon me. I had nowhere to live for a while. I didn't know how I was even going to put gas in the car. I ate frozen bagels every day for a month because that's all I had. It was really, really, really hard, So I did what I was talking about before. I just took it a brick at a time. What can I do today? Because the only thing I could think short of doing that is just dying. And I'm not ready to do that. So what do I have to do today to get out of this stupid house and do something that's going to be progress? So at one point, I took a really, really menial job, but just a job that was so beneath the education level I had in my licensure. And it paid like $400 a week, which was, poverty level. But it was enough because I didn't have kids at home anymore. And, it was barely enough to at least eat 2 meals a day and put gas in the car and go to the job to do it. So I did it. And that was all I could worry about at that time. I couldn't worry about, what about next month's bills? And I just worried about getting that job and then doing that job. So the job had to do with visiting insurance offices. And that's the career I had been in before. I was an insurance agent and a financial advisor. No longer was because I didn't have all the licenses and I had an arrest record at that point that I had to get rid of because of the elders and everybody. So it was an odd thing because my job had nothing to do with insurance, but I was visiting insurance agencies. So I'm dealing with that one brick, the one brick that was like, what am I going to do for a living now? And so I would visit maybe 12 to 15 agencies a day. And one day I'm visiting an agency and I'm trying to remember how it happened exactly. But for some reason, I mentioned how, I am licensed to do this, and that. I just am lacking the Series 66 license. It's a license to be able to do financial advisory. And apart from that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I had that all the stuff straightened out. And the person at the front desk said, "Oh, you got to talk to Ron. He's the agency owner. You got to talk to Ron." So I go in and talk to Ron, and he's like 64 years old, and he's looking to retire within a year, and he's looking to sell the agency. And he's like, "We really like you because you've been coming to visit us every month for months, and Cindy really, or Kathy was her name, she really likes you, and I don't want some buckaroo, knucklehead young guy that thinks he's hot stuff to come in here and ruin her life, make her life difficult for her. So what do you think?" I said, "Oh man," we talked and talked. I said, "Well, I got to get my licenses straightened out." And what I had not straightened out yet was the arrest thing. But, and then there's a matter of like, well, how do I buy an agency? I'm penniless at this point. We worked it all out and we came up with a plan to do it, Yep. And I thought, holy mackerel, it's because I was working this crappy job that all it was one of the bricks in that wall that I solved in a very, very simple way that was not anything about where I want to be 5 or 10 years from now, which is what I have to do today. And just because I was working on this one brick, all of a sudden I stumbled into this opportunity. Yeah. And I'm basically working for that company now, not in the capacity I was. But so it happened. Now, that was sort of luck in a way, but it was because I just didn't worry about the big picture. I'm not worried about, I'd love to own an agency someday. How am I going to do it? I couldn't. There's no way. Where am I going to get the money from? My licenses are plus I got this arrest thing on my record that wasn't quite off yet. I finally got it expunged because it was nonsense. So I just was like, I can only take things one day at a time. And the next thing you know, something like almost fell in my lap. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen because it was really kind of a coincidental thing, but it was definitely a function of the fact that I just concentrated on my simple job, which allowed me to concentrate on other things because it was so simple and it didn't take a lot of my day. And the rest kind of worked itself out. Now, all these years later, other things have happened, obviously. There have been setbacks, and we all have setbacks. It's just what happens all the time, But if you just deal with them one at a time. And I mean, I had a setback about 1.5 years ago that was like worse than anything that's ever happened in my life. And all I could do was drive my car in the eastern direction. I have no idea where I was going, and I know where to live and whatever. And little things came into place one at a time, just because I didn't take it 15 tests at a time. I just took it one at a time. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I've been talking for like the last 5 minutes about myself, and I don't mean to like sound like a braggart or something like that, because I could fall apart just like anybody else, Yeah. And emotional things are we have to really work on like a lot of what I've been talking about is circumstantial stuff like jobs and stuff like that. But if our goals have to do with emotions, that has its own properties, its own difficulties. When it's all about how do I deal with the fact that my mom's shunning me and I still feel worthless after years of being in that organization. That has to do with our belief system, really. Just changing how we see ourselves has to do with why do we see ourselves that way. Sort of a different topic, but it's kind of on topic, I guess.
Yeah, it's still the same principle, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
One simple brick
Mm-hmm.
after another simple brick.
Yeah.
When you think about the Wall of China, they didn't do that overnight.
Right. Yeah, look at it now. It's like the one thing that's visible from outer space, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. So that one simple thing, that's what we've got to work out most of the time, don't we?
Yeah.
So thinking about everything we've talked about, what would your encouragement be for those ones who are struggling with, well, I should say we all struggle with bricks or blocks in our lives. What the one bit of encouragement do you feel that we could use to slowly work through things?
In terms of encouragement, I would say you can do it and you will do it. You're not going to feel like you are today, a year from now or 2 years from now. You're going to have bad days, sure, but you are going to work through it, and life is going to get better. And the same principles apply. It doesn't matter whether it's a work situation or an emotional situation, or just feeling crappy about ourselves because of the way we were taught. It really comes down to what do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to be a year from now? If where you want to be a year from now is you don't want to feel worthless, okay, what's making you feel worthless? Well, I don't know. I guess it's because, they were always teaching us how it's not important. What's really important is Jehovah's name and the organization. So, okay, do you believe that? No, not really. Oh, so you take it one brick at a time again, and before you know it, you're not. And I'm not saying it's not; those feelings are not going to come back because if we're used to feeling bad about something, it's a pattern and it could come back every so often. But if we develop a pattern of changing our thinking to like, well, I don't believe that anymore. So why should I feel worthless? Then you can go on to the next step, which is, maybe it is time to get that college degree. Maybe you're not so dumb after all, like Dad told you were, or whatever. And just again, one brick at a time, and we can really, in other words, it works with emotions, it works with circumstances, it works with jobs, it works with anything. Just one brick at a time.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you very much for coming on and helping us to look. There's so much to any one of the subjects we talk about, and we can't do that all at one time. So you've given some practical things in which we could do. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to touch base with you?
Well, there's a whole bunch of ways, but I guess the easiest one is to go to my website, Open Path Life Coach, 4 words, but all one word, Open Path Life Coach. And it's got, you can email me. There's my business phone numbers on there. It's not my personal phone number, but I'd call it business. But, contact me. Or if you look me up on Facebook, I'd be more than willing to have a chat, whatever you want to do. I consider myself sort of a pro at overcoming obstacles, not because I'm a genius, but just because I've had so many obstacles. And my attitude is like, I'm not going to die just because this, and that happened to me. I'm still breathing. And as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to do something about it. And I just learned to do it one thing at a time. So I'm not a genius. I don't have a doctorate in anything. But and problems still happen. I still have obstacles every so often, and sometimes I really wish, like, oh geez, not again. Like, you got to be kidding me, But you just sort of learn how to overcome obstacles one at a time, and it becomes a pattern. And I think you want to develop that pattern of not necessarily needing to talk to a therapist every week for the rest of your life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we can kind of lift ourselves up out of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And for those who watched it live, we appreciate you being here. Also, for those ones who are going to watch it later, if you have any questions, by all means, put them in the comments, and we can get back to you with regards some assistance if you require it. But until then, we hope that everybody will have a great weekend, or what's left of the weekend. And we look forward to seeing you again in one of our upcoming live streams. But until then, look after yourselves, try and smile, keep safe, but most importantly, enjoy life. See you next time. Bye for now.
Okay, bye-bye.